Hi, my name's Niki. I'm the Obsessive Bookseller, and welcome to my channel. Today is my wrap-up for May 2022, and I finished a lot of books this month. I think the key for me really is reading just one book at a time. And while I failed miserably at that with my physical reads, I managed to keep just only one audiobook going at a time, and it paid off. I had so much fun. I'm filming without a microphone today. I took my microphone set upstairs to charge it yesterday, and somewhere between charging it and now, it vanished. And I'm told that the audio quality of it sucks anyway, so we'll see if this is any better. I may have to order a new one. But yes, I'm so organized, and yet I still managed to misplace all the things, and I cannot even fathom where it ended up. If my 5-year-old were home, I would think he stole it and put it somewhere, but he's not, so I can't blame him. This month I finished Infidel by Cameron Hurley. It's book 2 in the Beldan Apocrypha series, and I liked it okay. It was better than the first one. It jumped like 10-20 years later, which I really appreciated because I was afraid that the story, the way it ended in the first one, would get a little stagnant. My only complaint is that there were a lot of shameless shock value grabs in this book. The author is very strong on her own. I don't think she needed the shock value to have a really good story. But that said, I rated it higher than God's War, and I'm looking forward to finishing the third one. I've got a buddy read starting in August, hopefully, for it, and I can't wait. Next up, for my Read Burn Horde, I finished The Winds of Kalikovo by Bradley P. Beaulieu, and I did not care for it. And when I say finished, I DNF'd it at about 50%. I have a full review up for it. The book just didn't work for me. It lacked a lot of really strong world building components, at least after the first 50 pages. And it wasn't a very plot driven book either, so it was solely focused on the characters, and I found them rather thin. So while that one wasn't a success, I also read Pure by Juliana Baggett for the same challenge, and this was much more successful. Now granted, this is a second read. I started this series ages ago and then put it down and just never made time to go back to it, but upon the second read, I think I like this even more than I did the first time around. This is a fiction dystopian novel that has quite a few teen main characters. So if you love Hunger Games, Divergent, the Legend series by Marie Lu, but feel like you've graduated from the YA market, this would be a really good next evolution. When I read this the first time around, I really hadn't read a lot of grimdark, and not saying that this is grimdark, but I had a really hard time with a lot of the visceral and awful things that were happening in this book. It was hard to read. Now I'm a little more experienced in the genre, and so was able to handle this one a lot more. And incidentally, this is one that also uses a mild bit of shock value to convey just emotion to the reader. But I will warn you, this is still one of the most bizarre books that I've ever read, but it has really cool concept, interesting characters, and I am looking forward to actually continuing this time around. I finished Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. I'm so sad that I'm caught up with everything First Law. This is one of my favorite series, top 3 at least. I love this writer so much. I do have a full review for this one, and basically it was everything I'd hoped it would be. This one was probably one of the most difficult ones to read based on the type of things that they were covering. To keep it as vague as possible, the wrongfully accused, I have a really hard time with that type of story. But it was done brilliantly. So the only thing I have left from this author is the Shattered Sea trilogy, so you'll be seeing that in my upcoming TBR because I'm already having withdrawal symptoms, so I need more Abercrombie. I also picked up Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. I grabbed this book out of the upcoming book haul pile, so kind of a sneak peek, but it's actually quite remarkable for me to have gotten to a book that I hauled so recently, so we're making progress. I went into this one pretty excited. I had just come off of the Kaiju Preservation Society and loved that one. And I loved the Old Man's War series, specifically the first book, but there were a couple of others that were really good within that. I was kind of expecting to be blown away by this one, and it was good, I really liked it. It had a much stronger overarching plot than a lot of the books that I've read from him so far. So for him, it's quite ambitious. But I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. Okay, we're gonna do the rest of this one sitting down because I keep losing my breath and feeling like I'm going to pass out. So the show must go on. Anyway, I did not enjoy the characters in this one as much as his Old Man's War or Kaiju. And I think that's the only difference. So far, it's shaping up to be a much more concise story, which I appreciate because Old Man's War was brilliant in a lot of ways, but the trajectory of the series was kind of all over the place. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing this one. It was a short read. It took me only like 2 days to get through, so I always appreciate quick wins. I finally finished Sweep of Stars by Maurice Broaddus. I have a full review up for this one as well. I had a really hard time with the second half of this book. I think by about the 50% mark when I realized I wasn't invested in the characters and the overall conflict kind of revealed itself, that I wasn't into the story as much anymore. But I requested this one as a physical arc. And I could have DNF'd it, but I want to kind of ground it into my head that if I'm going to get greedy and request something, that I'm going to see it through to the end whether I'm liking it or not. It'll make me a lot more careful of what I request in the future. Yes, this one was really well done for the type of story that it was trying to be. I really liked the building of a community in the story. I just, didn't feel connected to it. And I half wonder if part of my problem is I wasn't quite in the mood to read it when I did, but it was a review obligation, so I felt like I had to. Maybe had I picked it up on a whim 5 years from now, I would have had a different experience with it. So, and take my criticisms with a bit of a grain of salt. But it is definitely a slow burn, character-driven beginning, and the plot kind of trickles in as the book progresses, but for me, it felt a lot like a build-up for the next novel. I'm having a lot of fun with Pokemon Adventures. This is book 4. So finished this one this month. I just read like a chapter a day or whatever, just something to pick up and kind of get my morning going. These have been super cute so far. The biggest surprise for me is that the first set of Pokemon manga, there's like 8 books. So far, 2 of them haven't had Red or Ash, as you may know him, in there at all. Like right now we're following this character Yellow. But lots of Pokemon awesomeness, and that's the real draw to the story for me, so I'm quite liking it. Oh, and they don't highlight Team Rocket in the same light. In the show, I thought they were really stupid. I couldn't stand them. But I'm quite liking them in here. They take themselves a lot more seriously. They're not in there for comic relief. I read She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I was a little hesitant to go in this one. I kind of braced myself because I have read Poppy War, the trilogy, and that one was quite brutal. And so any kind of Asian fantasy now, I kind of like go in like, okay, be ready for anything. And there were some harsh themes in this one, but nothing super graphic or visceral. Like, you know someone died horribly, but you didn't get a lot of details about it, which is actually a good thing. It's nice to have a few fantasy novels that you can recommend to a bit of a younger crowd, or that are accessible to people who don't like a lot of brutality in their books. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first part was a solid 5-star read for me. One of my favorite things I've read in the last couple years. It was so good. So good! It followed just a single character and you got really into her world and her motives. And then part 2 happened, and that's when we get a whole bunch of other POVs splitting the attention of the story, and I don't think it was to its benefit. I'm still trying to percolate my thoughts on this one because I only finished it about a day or 2 ago. But by the end of the book, I found it a real struggle to get through. The beginning of the story was so strong. It was all about the motive behind this character's actions, what she was hoping to accomplish. And I think what the second half of the book failed for me is in appreciating how she's going about getting to where she wants to be. I found that part really lackluster. I don't know, if you want to be someone great in a specific field, wouldn't you like study? Maybe take some sword fighting lessons? Writing lessons? I don't know. Do anything you can to improve your knowledge. Either that or really figure out how to be savvy when it comes to political maneuvering. But none of that really happened. It was more like happenstance and luck and just being in the right place at the right time. So I found that incredibly unsatisfying. And so when I do a thorough review, I'll get more in depth with why exactly it bothered me, because I have some pretty extensive thoughts on it. But yes, so we're evening out. The first half was such a solid 5-star that it still was worth reading. And even though the last like 2/3 was about a 2-star read for me, I'm still coming in at a 3-star. So worth your time, but you know, I wish it were a little different. By the end of today, I will have finally finished 1,000 Names by Django Wexler. This is an odd book for me. I'm really enjoying a lot of aspects about it. A lot of things that people criticize about military fantasy, about the battle scenes being really boring. This is kind of a good representation of what not to do. Now, granted, I was going to say it was written a long time ago, but it's only 10 years old. So with that in mind, I have read a lot better battle scenes, but overall it wasn't off-putting enough to throw me off the story. I still really enjoyed the story. It's kind of an odd progression of story for me. So it's represented as a flintlock fantasy with magic. And in this first book, other than the prologue, there's been practically no magic at all. So if you're going into this, you're going into it for the military aspect. And the beginning was awesome about really nurturing the kind of development of this army. But I don't know what happened, but we suddenly switched what was going on, and it became not about the army at all, and all about these random other conflicts of the characters that had nothing to do with the army, but the army is kind of integral to the whole plot. So yeah, I don't know. I was really digging the training sequences, and I felt like that could have been something that really carried through the whole thing, but it was just kind of just enough of a teaser to make you want more, and then it just stopped working on that. But other than my small gripe with the action scenes, the rest of it is written quite well, and I'm enjoying the flow of the story, the author's voice. This is not the first thing I've read from him. I've done his Ash one, I can't remember the full name, and Ship of Smoke and Steel. And I will say I'm liking this one enough to want to continue, but I feel like I need a little bit of a break, like maybe a month or so in between. This was better than a 3-star read for me, but I need to percolate on it a little more. At the very beginning of the month, I read Essentialism and Effortless by Greg McKeown. Essentialism lacked a little bit of overall organization to the book, and there wasn't a clear point where he's like, here's how you do it with steps 1, 2, and 3. It was more just reiterating the idea, and while you're listening to him reiterate the ideas over and over again, you can kind of get an idea of what you want to change in your own life. So in that regard, I found it really inspiring, like doing more with less and freeing yourself up for the things that really matter. That's very much on par with what I've been working towards anyway. So I finished that one and then picked up Effortless. So once you decide what's important, figure out how to make some of the like more difficult tasks that you really don't enjoy doing, but you have to, more fun. Anybody can get behind that. And I thought this second book was a lot more concise and a lot more actionable. My favorite quote from it is, "Don't do more today than you have time to fully recover from by tomorrow." And he recommends, like, I'm a person who has endless to-do lists, just tons of stuff that could be done that I will work on if I have time to. He suggests throwing that out the window and just doing your main 3 have-to-dos per day and just limiting it to 3. If you do more, great. If you have energy for more, great. That's awesome. But if you only have energy for those 3 things and you get them done, that sense of pride and accomplishment will help give you momentum for the next day. And as the last 2 months I have not felt very well, it has been kind of a saving grace, trying to just focus on fewer things and doing just the essentials. So yeah, I got a lot out of these 2 books. All right, quickly let's go through a couple of the books that I am in the middle of. which will probably come up in a couple days on my TBR, but still slogging through Malice. This is such a good book. I just have so many other things going. I am trying to make time to focus solely on it again. If I can help it, I am not going to allow myself to put down things like this that I'm really enjoying because of a pending obligation, because it really wrecked my momentum for the book and I ended up having to start over again. So I was about 50%, now I'm at about 10. But yeah, are you sick of seeing this on my TBR? I am. I just want to read it because I want to continue in the series and read more John Gwynne because I really like him. Also going are a bunch of ebooks. The one I'm enjoying the most, which I will probably finish within the next couple of days, is Ruby Fever by Alona Andrews. Oh, it's so good. Don't let the covers fool you. This is pure urban fantasy where at this point in the story, the love story isn't even a real component. We're just talking about house politics and these massive battles and all this magic using. It is awesome. And it's the final arc of Catalina's story. And at about 60%, I am loving every moment. I'm kind of savoring it, but kind of also rushing through it because I want to see what happens next. So these authors have earned their place in my top 5 favorite authors for a reason. And this one is by far holding up. Of all the obligations I have, this one is furthest out, but I will probably finish it first because I'm most excited about it. I'm still reading Star Wars Paradise Snare. This one's going pretty well. I'm not sure I'm totally behind what they're doing with the character, but I'm enjoying the story. I'm loving seeing more of where he came from and what kind of shaped him as a kid and yeah, all that stuff. It's been pretty cool. So I'm about 40% onto this one. I'm also very begrudgingly reading Locklands because I requested it before I finished and didn't like Shorefall. And so far this one is making a stronger case for itself. I'm about 15% in. And the reading experience is a lot more pleasant than the audiobook experience. That might be why I'm enjoying it a little more. But even still, one of my criticisms of Shorefall was that it's level 10 from the beginning and just to maintain that the whole way through. So there was no variation, very little anyway. And so far this one is on par, just level 10 intensity, everybody's dying and we just keep going. Careen to the end, I guess. But we'll see how it goes. This one is probably my #1 obligation to get through by the end of June. I'm also reading Trouble with the Cursed by Kim Harrison. Very enjoyable read for me. Kim Harrison is one of those authors who I feel like when I'm reading her books, I'm just relaxed and I'm completely enmeshed in her world. I'm not thinking about evaluating the book, which does not happen very often. The only thing I'm evaluating is how awesome each new thing she introduces is over everything else that I've already read from her. I really love what she's doing with the series. And even in this, 15th or 16th book, she's finding ways to reinvigorate my interest in what's going on and with all the characters. This is a weird comparison, but if you love Robin Hobb for how slow and gradual her storytelling is and how much time she allows you to get really enmeshed with the characters, that's what Kim Harrison does for me. Kim Harrison is my urban fantasy Robin Hobb comparison. It's been so long since I read the first book, I cannot remember if that type of feel came along right away or if it took a while in the series to get going. I remember being floored and completely committed by book 8, but I know I was enjoying it before then or else I wouldn't have kept going. And that wraps it up for me. I read 10 books this month. Well, I read more than that, but I finished 10 books this month, and that is almost double what I've been doing up to this point. And the best part is I don't really feel like I've forced myself through anything. I don't feel like I've kind of worn myself out trying to read more. It's just come organically, and I think a lot of it has to do with, as I mentioned at the beginning, just allowing myself one book at a time. And so my goal this month is to get through a lot of the multiple ebooks I have going so I can get that down to just one book at a time as well. And I think my reading experience will just be so delightful for the summer. But as it is, I love a lot of the titles that I finished here, so can't wait to see what next month brings. What books did you read this month? Anything that you really loved? Love to hear about it in the comments. So, thank you for joining me, and I hope to catch you next time.